Welcome to Success is Weird and Messy. I am your host, Kathleen Gabriel. Every week, I talk with business owners about all the things that can happen when you carve your own path in the business world and how those people turned obstacles into opportunities. Today, I am so excited to speak with Jackie Roby. Jackie is a relationship mindset coach and a self-doubt dismantler and the owner of Inspired Journey Consulting. Jackie, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kathleen. Success is weird and messy.
I think anyone who owns a business finds that out along the way. Even if they didn't start out thinking they're like, oh no, I've got a real simple business. It's a straight path. Turns out no, it never is.
Not even close.
No, so I gave the briefest possible introduction to your business. Can you tell me and everyone what it is that you do?
Well, I think you gave a great teaser. What I do is I empower ambitious women of color and allies to break free from hustle culture, reclaim their time freedom, and become the main character of their stories instead of an extra. I am able to help people to dissolve the shame that tends to come with the role of even being a woman, of asking for help, of feeling this pressure and overwhelm that we need to know how to fix everything.
That's incredible. I resonate with that so deeply. And really with that, like what kind of people are you working with? That is this every person? Are you talking with other business owners? Like who are the people that you're helping out?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I would say that the clients who are jazzed and like ready to go typically are women of color who are in long-term relationships, whether they're married or with their partner. They are usually working for someone else
Okay.
or have a really strong corporate background. They might want to venture out, but that's not necessarily the scope of it for them. What's typically happening is that they feel like this badass at work, but then at home, they're feeling like a failure.
Uh, yep.
And they're wondering, how can I keep all of these plates spinning?
And how do you how do you do that? How do you bring that main character energy back to these women, particularly when these are people who have been probably culturally conditioned to put other people first, to put themselves second. And frankly, you're talking about being a badass at work. Part of that is when you're a badass at work, it's because you're helping other people. So, how do you bring that back into the focus of themselves?
That's a great question. And you're so right that it is a cultural conditioning. I know
Yeah.
myself as a Latina, I was shocked to learn and then also completely understand deeply that in our culture, we prioritize the partner,
Yeah.
then the kids, then the pets, then the home.
And then where are you?
Right. Maybe there or is family extended
Yeah.
even further.
Mm,
And what we do is we spend time looking at the expectations, these unwritten rules. But first, we have to understand the noise that's happening in our head.
yeah.
Because part of it obviously is cultural conditioning, but there are things that are going on that we cannot control. So we have to bring them to the light.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when you start to see them, you can start to call them out. So usually that's the beginning of the process. What is happening? What is that message that keeps coming to you that is beating you over the head every time you want to do something for yourself?
Yeah. And then how do you help people break through? Like hearing that voice is one thing, but it's always the then what of like, oh, yeah, I've heard the voice and I know that I'm not where I want to be. I know I'm not doing what I want to do. But especially in that cultural context of, well, I'm in this habit. of thinking about myself in a way, thinking about the world in a way, my relationships. How do you recenter people so that they're not giving up like important parts of their life? But you mentioned like letting go of hustle culture. As as someone who's worked a lot in Silicon Valley, boy, I recognize hustle culture. Um, but how do you bring that all together into improving a life rather than letting important parts go?
Mhm. Well, first and foremost, when we talk about awareness, they are given homework, oftentimes, of calling out that voice.
Hmm,
And what happens is that's actually part of a mindfulness exercise. So we're looking really at the base of this to retrain their brain.
okay.
So the negative within us, it lives in our subconscious. 95% of our thoughts are unconscious, 80% of those are negative.
Oh my God, seriously?
It's a
Oh,
lot.
that is so many. It explains so much, but that is so many.
Right. But that's how we're built, right? If we think about the fact that the negative processing where our fight, flight, freeze, appease lives in the brain, it is the most evolved aspect of us. But the joy, the wisdom, the strong decision making, our intuition, the happiness, it all lives in the less developed piece of us. So we need to build new neural pathways. If we were to think about, going down a path and to take one road that is constantly traveled, that's that negative pathway. So simply calling things out, noticing them in the moment and just going, oh, that was the negative noise. I hear it. It's almost like bringing you back onto the road. Then we follow it up with mindfulness practices. And that creates a pathway on the other way towards the wisdom, towards the calm, towards the happiness. It also brings more creativity, more productivity. We are
Yeah.
terrified that if we pause, that everything will fall apart, but it's the exact opposite when we're pausing with intention.
I feel like that has been true in so many aspects of life. And I feel like the more I hear about and the more I learn about mindfulness practices, and I've come to that through therapy, certainly. But the more I apply that to different parts of my life, you're absolutely right. And honestly, I don't necessarily even think about applying mindfulness to certain parts of my work or applying that sort of awareness to certain parts of my work or my life or whatever. And I think that's such a valuable reminder and practice and coaching to receive because I don't know, if there's one thing I've learned on my own journey, it's I I want to do everything by myself because I keep thinking that as an independent, strong person, I should be able to do everything by myself. And no one does everything by themselves. No one does it.
No.
And so, having someone to coach you and guide you along that path so that you are reminded of, oh, this is what I'm really trying to do with my life, and this is how I do it. I mean, that's extraordinarily valuable.
Thank you very much. I will tell you, I have a client who told me how surprised he was that food tastes better after the work we did.
What was it because he was actually paying attention? Because that's something I also struggle with.
Yeah, because he was
Yeah.
being mindful in his life, because he was putting in this practice every single day, multiple times a day,
Mm,
really doing it, creating those new neural pathways so that he was present. And that's really
yeah.
what we're getting down to. Mindfulness is a super big word and it's used in so many ways, and it is very important in every way that it's used. In this particular way, it's really about connecting to your senses.
Yeah.
Because when we do that, we're getting back into the body, which allows us to be present. When we're present, it's the best and only way that we can learn, for one, but also it allows that pause so that we can respond instead of react.
Hmm. Yeah.
And all the while contributing to new neural pathways. so that in the future, we're never going to eradicate all of the negative
Yeah.
where it's like swimming upstream. But what we're going to do is we're going to have a quicker recovery and
Yeah.
we'll increase the positive.
Yeah. I mean, when you put it that way, that makes all the sense in the world. But you're absolutely, in talking to you, I'm realizing how many different ways I don't necessarily do that support work on my own. And
Mhm.
that's where it kind of takes a village of having someone on the outside guiding you and saying, hey, this is my perspective on what's happening. And this is my perspective on how we can change things.
Oh,
Makes a huge difference.
absolutely. I mean, it makes me think of the work that you do. If
Mm,
you were to think of a leader who is expanding and has a team, and their team wants to have a career map, for example.
yes, absolutely. I mean, in the HR space, that's being aware of what your team actually wants, being present with them is, again, like the most valuable thing you can do because if you're just treating people like cogs, it's funny how that just doesn't work.
No,
Whereas if you treat people like human beings within the system and you build the system to support them and say, all right, well, we have a job here, but this is the future of it, or here are the lateral pathways away from it, if that makes more sense. That means that you're going to have people who are going to expand and grow with you rather than leave the organization to expand and grow with someone else.
exactly.
Yeah.
And if I were to think about the last corporate job that I had before I started my business, I was begging for a career map,
Yeah.
begging
Yeah,
for
you are so not
years,
alone. That is
years.
unfortunately pretty standard.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
now, knowing what I know about how our minds work and what's happening to us is what was likely going on with my leaders. I can have a little empathy in this space, a
Come
little
on, a little bit.
empathy in this space to say they were likely just so overwhelmed, continuing on this hamster wheel. And in that hustle culture, going, 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 constantly in survival mode, that they didn't have the ability to creatively think in this way, which is,
Yeah.
I imagine, a huge benefit of having a partner like you that comes in and says,
Yeah,
let's figure out this career map together, that prioritizes things where you're already on your day-to-day life. You're like, how am I going to add this in? It's the support,
absolutely.
it's the accountability, that kind of extra piece. I see that as that synergy of what my clients look for and imagine what yours do as well.
And honestly, that's why I like working with small business owners because it is that synergy of people who own a business and want that business to thrive and succeed and grow. Because of course, but then working from that, saying, all right, well, how do I do that with a way that fits with my morals and ethics? How do I do that in a capitalist society? How do I do that without utterly burning myself out?
Mhm.
Because I'm sure you go through this as your own business owner as well. Um, it can be very easy to just get on that hamster wheel and run because there's always more to do.
Mhm.
So I'm actually curious, how do you, as your own owner, your own business owner, how do you run your business and stay true to all of the things that you're trying to achieve with your clients so that you're not in that hustle culture, but you're still thriving as an owner?
I practice what I preach.
Yeah.
And about 17 years ago, I fell into my first depression, and it was the deepest one I've ever had.
Mm,
And granted, being the first, I had no idea what was happening. It was terrifying. I experienced panic and paranoia, which I later learned had a lot to do with my complex post-traumatic stress disorder. So since then, it has become a priority for me to always make sure my mental health is in a good place. Years later, I started to understand that mental health and mental wellness are two separate things. And so the mental wellness aspect has so much more to do with choosing the positive and not in a toxic positivity kind of
yeah.
way, but in a genuine way. So you really do feel it, and it creates the shift within your body, within your brain to do that. Toxic positivity isn't going to lower cortisol.
Yeah, turns out.
Who knew? Uh,
If only it, no, 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 not if only it did.
so I already had a morning routine, which they tell you oftentimes you listen to any podcast, they're going to talk about starting your morning routine as an entrepreneur, as a business owner. And I already had one in place. So my morning always consists of meditation or mindfulness, whatever that particular practice is. And meditation is a form of mindfulness, but people view it really differently. So I like to categorize it uh,
Yeah.
so you know that you have choices. So it starts in that way. I know that I am a morning person. I know that my best energy is this time of day. I wake up early. The earlier, the better. I'm usually a 5 a.m. rise and shine kind of person. I have learned that I start to burn out in the afternoon, like the candle's going out. I have nothing left to give. So I'm really thoughtful on how I create my calendar, where I'm giving my energy at what times of day. I'm protective of my time boundaries. Things that I've learned along the way that, man, I wish I had you then, is how to set boundaries around my values
Yes.
so that I am calling in the right clients.
That is so key to everything. Tell me more about that.
So I ended up adding in, and it's clear on my website, diversity, equity, inclusion
Hmm.
as a value. And I did that intentionally because I was faced with unintentional racism. I'm being very kind in this.
Yeah, I assume there's a lot of unspoken words there.
Right. And it was difficult to process and feel that I was being disrespected, and it was not the relationship that I wanted, especially knowing that I'm choosing this business for myself. So realizing that I wanted to be more clear on what was important to me. I had also come into my business originally working in the wellness travel arena of life from a different perspective, looking more on sales and marketing because that was my background. I feel very strongly about body positivity and body acceptance.
Okay.
And oftentimes in the wellness space, there's a lot of diet culture that comes up.
Yes, correct. That I've experienced that a lot. I think every woman who exists in the world has experienced that a lot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So for me, I don't feel aligned with a lose weight this way type of messaging. I'm just not a diet culture person. I am about loving you and taking care of you in your
Yeah.
body and loving it in the way that serves you.
Beautiful.
Thank you. So I made sure to highlight that.
Yeah.
And then because of my own experience with depression, anxiety, PTSD, and too much abuse,
Yeah.
I'm trauma informed. Different from a lot of coaches, I've had some say to me, I don't need to hear their backstory.
Hmm.
We're moving forward.
Okay.
And I know that we process differently.
Yeah.
So I create a safe space for you, for my clients, and then we do move forward together. But I recognize that it might look different, but that's
Yeah.
okay. That's what I want it to be. So I make sure to really speak my values a lot more and set those boundaries. I think first in just how I present myself and the way I use my voice. But it was because of those really uncomfortable moments where honestly, I'm a highly sensitive person. Part of that is like idealizing this world in rose-colored glasses. And when they come off, it is painful,
Hmm.
right? It is so
Yeah.
painful.
Yeah.
So I've navigated this business by burning out, experiencing racism and discrimination,
Ugh.
having diet culture thrown at me,
Yep.
all of the things. So I've experienced it in that way. And so then I've gone, oh, okay. So it's all been trial and error, right?
Yeah.
Um, but now it also gives that great lens of I know what everybody's facing in their day to day and how difficult that is, even when you, in theory, control the environment.
Right. In theory. Well, and I think that's an excellent point that you bring up of you control the environment, but especially when you're starting a business, you might just think, oh, well, I need to take whatever people come to me. I need clients, and I guess these are clients, and so off we go. And I think all of us who continue being in business learn at a certain point that there's a difference between a client and your client. And
Yes.
that is that is the story that I'm hearing here is that you wanted to work with your clients, with the people that you resonate with. And with that, was that something that you came to over time? Was that something that you had a realization one day? You're like, oh, I see what this is and I don't want it. What was that journey like for you?
Definitely over time.
Yeah.
And it continues to fine tune because that's the journey of what we're on, especially when you're highly in touch with your intuition. So that has been a big part of being in business for me is getting further and further connected into my intuition, into my wisdom, and knowing this is for me, this isn't for me. What does this look like?
Yeah, and that's really it. There's always that, there's always something new on the horizon. And with that, what do you think the horizon looks like for you? Like what's next for you, do you think?
I see, I see my business continuing to grow to the point where I have other people that are working with me. Because right now I am solopreneur with occasional contractor. I want to live my truth through this business, which is choosing diverse voices, creating spaces of equity, and making sure that we have diversity of thought. So I really want to have different representation within my business so that we're doing things in the most inclusive way, continuing to learn and grow. I am a speaker. I anticipate bigger stages. And one thing I always envision is a leadership retreat at an immersive wellness resort. So
Ooh. Oh, I love that. Keep me informed when that happens.
done.
Excellent. Well, I would like to thank you again for joining us today on Success is Weird and Messy. Where can people find you and Inspired Journey?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Jackie Roby. You can also find me on Instagram at Inspired Journey Consulting. Ask me about the She Suite or the She Suite Connector.
Absolutely. Well, thank you to everyone for listening. You can find Success is Weird and Messy wherever you get your podcasts. And it helps us so much if you follow, rate, and review. And we'll see you next week.